Technology has changed an incredible amount over the past 30 years. Back when Pokémon Red and Blue first released, 3D games looked like this. Today, they look like this. Okay, so maybe it hasn't changed that much. But in the Pokémon universe itself, we have seen a very interesting gradual development of new technological advances and gadgets that our protagonists get to use during their adventure, mirroring real-world changes pretty closely honestly, to the point that the idea of a gadget nowadays doesn't even really exist. It's all just a smartphone now. But let's take it back to the days of old, starting, partly, with Pokémon Red and Blue, Generation 1. These are the only games in the entire franchise that don't really have a unique gadget, with all kinds of useful functions, more or less mirroring the real-world situation at the time. Now, I don't mean to say that 1996 was prior to the invention of electricity or handheld devices. I mean, the Game Boy exists for one, but it wasn't even remotely as ingrained in daily life as it is today, or even as it would be just a few years later. As such, I can imagine the developers didn't feel the need to incorporate portable devices into their fictional depiction of Japan. And if there was the desire to have this represented, you could make the argument that the Pokedex fills that role. Currently, we would never consider the Pokedex to be a mere gadget. It's way more than that. But if we scale our vision back to when the Pokemon world was nothing more than Kanto, you could say this was effectively the latest and greatest technology it had to offer. And while by the next game, Gold and Silver, the Pokedex would officially stand next to the usual gadgets, as it has been ever since, purely the fact that the design of the Pokedex has consistently changed over the years to match the appearance of the current portable devices of real life shows that this has to be considered a gadget to an extent. While the original Pokedex designs always reminded me more of a digital book, it's likely the intention was more to resemble the Game Boy, with Gen 3's Pokedex resembling the Game Boy Advance, before Gen 4 then finally made the switch to a phone-inspired design, which has since morphed into the Rotom Dex, remakes notwithstanding. But alright, the Pokedex is more a tangent than a true gadget. The first real one to grace our protagonist's hands is the Pokegear from Gold and Silver. Back when the Dex was still a game console, this was the phone, with a design clearly based on a brick phone, the most common mobile phones of the era, with a Silphco logo proudly displayed on its official artwork. What I've always found very interesting is that from the very get-go, the Pokegear is not complete. You start with only two apps, so to speak, being a clock and a phone, with the map following shortly after in Cherry Grove Town. The map is obviously just convenience, putting the town map out of your limited bag and into this device. But the time is one that hasn't really aged well, but at the time it was useful. Pokémon Gold and Silver rely heavily on the real-world time, and while we are currently surrounded by devices that tell the time every waking moment of our life, that wasn't really the case back then. Again, I'm not saying people in the 90s didn't have clocks, most definitely not, but it also wasn't a given to just have the time available for you at all moments, so the game tracking it themselves was very useful. But obviously the big new app you start the game with is the phone function, which I would argue was actually pretty big at the time, a huge step forward from what Red and Blue offered. The idea that this game actually had a functioning phone structure in place, where NPCs would regularly call you, felt super advanced, even if, looking back, it honestly wasn't that impressive under the hood as it appeared to be. On the more annoying side was the fact that the original Pokegear could only store 10 numbers, 2 of which were your mom and Professor Elm's, which couldn't be deleted, meaning that you had 8 slots left for a total of 28 potential phone pals. On one hand, this added to the grand feeling of the feature, but again, looking back, it just feels annoying. The final function of the Pokegear was the radio, and while I wouldn't argue its gameplay purposes are something extraordinary, even if it is cutely used on occasion, like in the Runes of Alph or with Kanto's Snorlax, what makes this function very memorable is that even in 2025, a radio function is still entirely unique to the Pokegear. It gives this device its own identity, something to remember it by. And even though the evolution of gadgets throughout Pokemon clearly mirrors the one we saw in real life, it is interesting that all of the gadgets we've had have had their own unique purposes that have never been repeated, and for the Pokegear, it's the radio. Now, obviously that only sticks if you don't count Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which bring the Pokegear back and essentially turn it into a more modern device. It now has themes, like most gadgets have had since. A clock isn't really a feature anymore, more so something that's always visible in the corner, like with modern devices, and you can now store unlimited phone numbers, which is useful since the number of trainers and even important characters handing them out has increased tenfold. But in essence, and in name, this is still the original Pokegear, and I think it says something about how feature-rich the original was that the remake didn't have to change this device too much to make it more modern. Well, in all but design. The redesign for the remakes definitely looks a lot less outdated. When we touched down in Hoenn, we were greeted by a brand new device, one that actually has a very unique and original inspiration, being a sat-nav device. You might currently still occasionally see devices like this in cars, but they used to be more prevalent as handheld devices as well, mostly used when venturing off into nature. And that kinda makes them the perfect device for a Pokemon game, seeing as that's exactly what we do, even if a real-life sat-nav is not even remotely as useful and feature-rich as the in-game PokeNav, courtesy of the Devon Corporation and handed to us by Mr. Stone after retrieving the Devon goods. Well, you would think it would essentially be a Pokegear 2.0, that actually isn't the case at all. The only retained feature is the map. Everything else is new and different. The time? Removed. And since Ruby and Sapphire don't have a day and night cycle, it's not that big a cut to make. The radio obviously isn't there, like I said, and while the phone system does appear to have been reworked and improved, it wouldn't become really obvious until Emerald. You see, Ruby and Sapphire had the Trainer's Eyes, which was essentially an expanded phone system where you could find out which trainers you could rebattle, which gameplay-wise is similar, but in terms of presentation, completely different. It wasn't until Emerald changed this for the match call system that it would really feel like an upgrade rather than a change, with you now being able to call whoever's number you had saved in your device. Newly added and unique to the PokeNav were the contest-focused features. The condition function allows you to see how your Pokemon would perform in the various contest stats, while the ribbon function shows which ribbons a Pokemon has obtained. Both are fairly minor, definitely not even close to being as cool or expanded as the radio function, but they are still unique to the PokeNav regardless. Oras replaced the device with the new PokeNav Plus, now resembling a Game Boy Advance SP. No longer does Mr. Stone give it to you, it's now available from the start, and has several new functions, like the Bus Nav, which is actually more similar to the radio function than anything else, Play Nav, which is where you access the new stuff X and Y added, more on that later, the Area Nav, which combines all the past functions of the PokeNav into one specific app, and of course, Dex Nav. In some eyes, still one of the best Pokemon functions ever. I don't want to go too deep into this, since I'd wager most of you know perfectly well what this is, and I don't think it's a super interesting talking point for the topic of this video, but it's worth pointing out that this is essentially the last big core function a Pokemon gadget has ever had. After all, post-Oras, the Rotom Phone was introduced and essentially made the de facto Pokemon gadget, reappearing constantly. And so, while it has all been streamlined since, I do think it is fair to say that unique features went out with a bang with DexNav in Oras. But let's reel it back in for a second here. We had a nice chronological streak going, which now brings us to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and its new shiny toy, the Poketch. Developed by the titular Poketch company, this device takes on the appearance of a smartwatch, a pretty decent future-proof device it has proven to be, to the point BDSP didn't even see the purpose of redesigning it much. While I have always loved Pokemon gadgets when playing through the games, none of the devices sucked me in as much as the Poketch. Everything about this device is just incredibly memorable. The way you get it with the clowns in Jubilife City is hard to forget. It's constantly active on the bottom screen, making it a very ingrained part of your experience, and then we haven't even talked about the long list of apps this thing has. 25 different functions you can easily switch between. That may not sound like a whole lot today, when you're most likely watching this video on a device that can do a billion things. But you have to remember that Diamond and Pearl are older than the first iPhone and the first Android smartphones. At this point in time, no one really had devices on their person that had this many different practical uses. So to have it in a Pokemon game was incredible. It really felt very futuristic of sorts. Now, obviously, the apps themselves are not exactly Call of Duty Mobile. There are like 5 different clock apps in here, a bunch of drawing apps, this was the DS after all, and more useless little fun things like a coin flip, calculator or pedometer. The dowsing machine was now a part of this device, you could track your Pokemon's happiness, daycare status and more, and another big reason why this device became so memorable, throughout your adventure it would continually expand. When you first receive it, there are only 4 apps on this thing, but over the course of the game it gradually grows and grows, partly due to story progression, but also partly through exploring, which made for a very fun gameplay loop at the time. Like I said, BDSP didn't change this device too much, although I do like the idea of incorporating the HMs into the Poketch. It feels fitting for this device to be the one thing altered in the game to facilitate the modern Pokemon standards. Would I say Pokemon gadgets peaked with the Poketch? I'm not entirely sure, because I think the remake versions of the Pokegear and PokeNav do give it a good run for its money, but comparing it only to the devices of the original games from a generation, I would say it reigns supreme personally. But admittedly, a part of that is because starting with Black and White, something changed. Whereas the Poketch was this all-including device, Unova doesn't have something like that, and instead separates several functions that could have made for a killer gadget into several places. On the bottom screen is now the C-Gear, which has a lot less single-player features, but instead focuses mostly on online. It's how you access the Entralink for the Dream World, it's how you go online to trade or battle, it even has a place where you could fill out surveys. But while in-universe the C-Gear is an actual device, we know Fennel developed it for example, it isn't really a physical gadget. Instead, that role is taken up by the Xtransceiver. And yes, it is Xtransceiver, not Xtransceiver, listen to your mother. This is the actual gadget of Black and White, a cross between a phone and a smartwatch, similar to the Poketch. Throughout the game, several characters will use this to call you, but the phone system is not even remotely as extensive as it has been in prior games, with even Gold and Silver's early structures honestly being more impressive. It wouldn't be until Black and White 2 that the Xtransceiver would get up to the same level as the original Pokegear, allowing us to call characters ourselves, which at least did lead to one of Pokemon's weirdest side quests with Yancey and Curtis. The sequels also added 2 minigames to its services, which, frankly, I genuinely didn't even know. Unlike the devices of old, the Xtransceiver could be used to communicate with actual real-life players, which is how it tied into the C-Gear, and it honestly feels like this was supposed to be its main purpose of existence, seeing as the other features feel surprisingly half-baked, one of the few things in Unova that gives that impression. And so, even though it certainly doesn't try to be as impactful as past gadgets have been, I think it is undeniable that the Xtransceiver is a step down from what we had prior, especially considering that the days of playing DS games online has long passed, meaning the main purpose of the C-Gear and all its connected features have been totally lost. And while on paper the same thing applies to the new devices we were introduced to in Gen 6, I do think the Holocaster, Kalos' answer to the Xtransceiver specifically, is much more memorable than its predecessor. It's tied into the story much better, with Lysander being the inventor of it and Malva reporting the news on it, similar in concept to the radio of old. And it also has a much better visual design philosophy, feeling much more futuristic and distinct, to the point Legend ZA was able to develop that even further. But in practice, yeah, this is a repeat of what Black and White did, except now tied even less into the game world. While the C-Gear does presumably exist in universe, the same cannot be said for X and Y's counterpart, the PSS. Don't get me wrong, feature-wise it is packed to the brim. It has more or less the same features as the Poke Portal in Scarlet and Violet does, which says enough about how impressive this touchscreen functionality was. But from an in-universe gadget perspective, the PSS spelled the end. It was too good. Could basically be copy-pasted going forward as something that was essentially a UI element, like a menu, rather than something with an in-universe presence. That role was exclusive to the Holocaster, which may have served its purpose well, but that purpose simply wasn't groundbreaking or essential. Starting in Sun and Moon, this role would be taken over by the Rotom Dex, which wasn't just a questionable presence in-game, it also started the new standard for gadgets. No more brand new devices with unique purposes. From now on, modern devices would have a Rotom living inside it instead. And while this could easily be portrayed as a negative thing, oh, Game Freak is so lazy they couldn't be bothered to create new cool gadgets, I don't think that is the reason at all. It simply mirrors real life. Once upon a time, you needed like 20 devices on your person to do what one simple device is now capable of doing. Game Freak didn't kill Pokemon gadgets per se, the rise of the smartphone did. And while I do definitely miss the unique aspect of gadgets as we used to have them, really strengthening the identity of a region, All those devices really did was reflect what people actually carried with them at the time. And currently, we carry a smartphone with us that has looked identical for like what? 15 years now. The Rotom Dex reflects that, and today we have arrived at the point where we have the first gadget that has been included in multiple regions, as the Rotom Phone is the gadget of not just Galar, not just Paldea even, but also Lumio City, and probably soon the next region we head off to. Hell, they made sure we had a phone in freaking Hisui of all places. Arceus took one look at us and thought, nah, can't separate a modern teen from their phone. It has become an essential, unmissable object in everyday real life. It has replaced every single unique gadget the world has ever known, from sat-navs, to watches, to maps, to cameras, to alarm clocks, you name it, and Pokemon merely reflects that. But before I wrap this up though, I want to briefly tackle one more gadget, the Pokemon Digital Assistant, or the P-Star-Da as I called it as a kid, which appears in the two Aura games. It is essentially Colosseum and XD's version of the PokeNav. But because these games have a more, I don't want to say mature, but let's call it serious tone, this device ends up feeling surprisingly modern. It has your email on it, it has your money on it, it has your trainer card, which is basically your ID, it has a Pokedex inside it, the strategy memo, and a map, as far as these games need one at least. That's like all functions the modern smartphone has, years before such a device was widespread. I mean, genuinely, looking at its features, the PDA has more in common with the Rotom Phone than it does any other gadget. That's crazy to think about. But yeah, that concludes our dive into the world of Pokemon gadgets. Do you miss the unique devices of old? Or do you prefer the more streamlined tool we have today? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.